Well, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the all-new Channel 2012. Today we're looking at the Mitsubishi WD-52531 LCD rear projection television set. Now, over the years I've featured a number of DLP rear projection television sets on the channel before that I have owned, but this is actually my first LCD projection television. In fact, up until the time that I was researching this to buy it, I didn't even know that Mitsubishi made LCD rear projection television sets. I always assumed for some reason that all their digital rear projectors were DLP. In fact, the Mitsubishi DLP that I reviewed is from around the same time period as this, so I'll be drawing a lot of comparisons between the two as we go on with today's video. So at this time we're going to go ahead and power it on. I'm not going to show you the remote because I don't actually have the original remote for it. I'm actually using one of our Mitsubishi spares. So while it's powering up, we will go ahead and talk about the specifications. It is a 52-inch LCD rear projection television set. As far as the dimensions go, it's about the same width and depth as its DLP counterpart, and it's actually only a little bit shorter, even though it looks like it's a lot shorter. It's an optical illusion, I guess, because of the silver on the trim piece there. Interestingly enough, it does weigh significantly less. The DLP model that I reviewed weighed, if I remember correctly, over 130 pounds, and the spec sheet says that this only weighs 70. So I don't know what is all different between those that makes for such a difference in the weight, but it is what it is, I guess. The power-up process and lighting of the lamp takes an average amount of time, nothing particularly slow or fast. I did get this set used on Craiglist for $5 in working condition, and before I go forward, I'd like to say a few words on that and mention a few things about buying stuff like this used on Craiglist. While I was fairly fortunate with this, there are people on Craiglist who sell junk knowingly and will try to play it off as a minor defect. In fact, it's very common to see rear projection television sets on Craiglist and people saying, well, it just needs a new lamp. And sometimes you'll see with those, they'll have serious problems that are obviously not lamp related. For example, a lot of times I see people try to sell rear projection television sets that have the green tint problem for $200, and they'll play it off as just needing a $30 lamp. So you do have to watch out for those. This one I was relatively careful with because I know the Mitsubishi digital rear projection television sets are vulnerable to the blinking green light of death problem. So I made sure in my correspondence with the seller before I purchased that wasn't the case. Now, at the time when I reviewed the DLP Mitsubishi rear projection television, they were actually still offering a free repair program as part of a settlement that they did. Since I did that video a couple years ago, they have stopped doing that program. So if you run across one of these on Craiglist or anywhere with the blinking green light of death problem, it's probably best to stay away from it because it's really not worth anyone's time to repair. The only reason it was worth it for me to fix that was because they were still doing the free repair program. So all that to say, watch out when you buy stuff used on Craiglist for people who are a little too quick to downplay problems with the product they're selling. Now at this time we're going to take a physical tour of the set. Down by the front here you have just the standard Mitsubishi television buttons, nothing too special there. On the left side we just have a third composite and S-video input. Nothing of a particular noteworthy nature on the right side. But this is kind of interesting here. Unlike the DLP rear projection television sets that Mitsubishi makes, the lamp compartment on these is on the back instead of being on the front, which is actually quite unusual. If we scoot over here, we can see the standard model number sticker, and over here we can see the I/O area here on the right side. Now this is a little bit of a departure from the DLP models too, because if you've ever seen one of those, you know this stuff is all on the left side. So the internal layout of these versus their DLP counterparts is certainly significantly different. As far as what you can plug in, you have two standard composite S-video inputs, two component inputs, two coaxial cable inputs, and two HDMI ports. This model does lack the VGA and FireWire ports that the DLP models have, but it does have one extra HDMI port to make up for it. There's also a USB port down there, but I don't think you can do anything with that but upgrade the firmware, and there are no firmware upgrades available for this television. Back on the front, we also have no card reader. One thing I kind of regret not documenting on video was my removal of the screen and cleaning of the lens. This one, to take off the screen, it's actually a little bit different. You end up having to locate all the screws on this side of the screen and remove them all. And then you pry off the front bezel as you would on any other Mitsubishi rear projection television set, and then you undo another dozen or so more screws. And then from there, the screen actually pulls straight off as opposed to lifting up and then off. Also noteworthy is that this television does not have, and I do not believe it is available with, the Diamond Shield screen protector. Now, if you remember my lengthy overview of the Mitsubishi DLP television, you might recall that I actually wasn't a huge fan of the Diamond Shield. Even though it was a great protector for the screen, it seemed to hamper the light output a little bit too. Speaking of light output, this television actually has an unusual quirk or feature, I guess, that allows it to dynamically adjust the brightness. It basically has a dynamic iris in there, and what it does, let me see, I'll try to go to an input with nothing on it here real quick to demonstrate this. When the brightness of a video source is quite low, then it will shrink the iris down so that very little light passes through to the screen to give it an illusion of having better contrast ratio. And while I appreciate the effort that went into that and the thought behind it, it's actually pretty annoying because not only is it kind of slow and a little bit noisy at times, it also just makes it hard to see dark scenes. So I would actually rather that it just not be there. And interestingly enough, there's actually no way to turn it off at all. Not in the standard menu or in the service menu that I can see. Speaking of the menus, it's pretty much standard digital Mitsubishi issue on-screen menus. Nothing too exciting here. I'll kind of step through these. You have the setup here, memorize the channels, change the clock, sleep timer. Oh, over here, this is kind of interesting. We've got the power saving mode option. We've got fast power on or low power. Now, the difference between these is that low power will not only turn the set off and turn the lamp off more quickly, it also shuts the internal computer down so that when you power it up next time, you have to actually wait for the light to blink for a little bit before it'll try to start up. If you have fast power on enabled, then the startup will be much quicker because it doesn't blink the light and have to boot up the computer. But that also increases the standby power usage to 30 watts. I don't know why these things are so inefficient and feel like they have to run all the time to do whatever it is they do when they're off, but that's just the nature of the beast. It is what it is. If we go up here to input name, we can change the names of the inputs. Actually, interestingly enough, when you first connect a device to a video source on there and turn it on, it'll actually pop up a little reminder on the screen and ask you to name it right there on the spot if you'd like. Let's see what kind of names you can come up with. You can call it VCR, satellite, HD disc, game, DVR, DVD2, DVD, camcord, cable box, or just the generic input name. So no, there's no way to actually customize them. They're actually kind of cheesy and lame templates for names. Another interesting aspect of this that is different from the DLP models, and this is actually something I'd expect more out of Samsung, is that you cannot change the input to any source that it doesn't believe there is something hooked up to right now. So even though there are a lot of other ports on here, you only see the antenna ports, the component 2, and the HDMI 1 because those currently have something hooked up to them that is sending the television a signal. So if the television doesn't think that something is hooked up to the port and on, you can't go to that input. Back to the menu here. Yeah, just like the DLP one, the remote input isn't real responsive either. But it's workable, I guess. Icon order, I guess you can rearrange how things show up on the device menu. You can customize the channels for the tuners. Options for closed captions, parental lock, audio video. You can reset the video settings per input. Just like with other Mitsubishi rear projection television sets in general, the brightness and contrast and color temperature and all those settings are done on a per input basis, which can be helpful or annoying depending on how you look at it. Video mute basically just determines what happens if there is nothing plugged in. If it's set to off and you have something plugged in that's not turned on, you'll just see a black screen. If it's on and you have something plugged in and not turned on, you'll see a blue screen. Kind of confusing. I don't know why they name it that, but it is what it is. Film mode, that's just the standard 3-to-2 pull-down feature. TV speakers, you have an option there to turn those off altogether if you're not planning on using the television's speakers. And that pretty much covers all the menu stuff. The only other thing worth mentioning here is the information screen. You can get to that by typing menu 2470, and that will show you the total hours on here. Unlike the other rear projection sets, this doesn't seem to show lamp hours and past lamp hours. The 7,985 that it shows in the corner, I can only guess, is the total running hours. So there's no way to reset lamp hours or know how many hours you got out of a particular lamp unless you journal those numbers on your own somehow. As far as picture quality and geometry goes, this one's actually pretty good. Overscan is kind of average for a rear projection television set. It's a bit better than the Toshiba. I'd say it's even a bit better than the Samsung that I reviewed last year. And the geometry is pretty good too. I'll pull up the test pattern for that here real quick. You can do that by going to menu and then pressing 2457 to bring up the service menu, and then pressing rewind or fast forward to pull these screens up. I'm not entirely sure that those percentages are accurate, but this still gives you a pretty good idea of the geometry and overscan stuff. So you can see there, it's actually not too bad. That said, let's take a look at some pros and cons. This set has decent picture quality, good geometry, minimal overscan, and is pretty lightweight. All in all, I'd say it was actually a pretty good investment of my $5 plus the $30 I spent on the lamp. My only major complaint is the dynamic iris, which kind of ruins the picture quality in dark scenes on television and movies. I hope you found today's video entertaining and informative, and be sure to stay tuned to the all-new Channel 2012 for the latest video clips, reviews, guides, food, computers, general around the house, and other high-quality, high-definition uploads. Thanks for watching.